Hello everyone, and welcome to vlog number 8 in our Essential Jesus series. The theme for today is all about the fact that Jesus died on the cross so that we could be forgiven, but our sins still have consequences, sometimes immediately and sometimes later in life. We're going to be looking at Psalm 14, especially focusing on verses 2 and 3. And this is what it says. God looks down from heaven to see if there are any who understand, who seek God. They have all turned aside. They have together become corrupt. There is none who does good, not one. What the verses are saying is that the most God-fearing people still are sinful. There's a verse in Romans 3, that says, all have sinned and all fall short of the glory of God. Now, Psalm 14 is written by David, and we're going to look briefly at the latter part of David's life as an example of what went wrong and what the consequences were. Now, in 2 Samuel 11, we learn that David was in his palace while his soldiers were off fighting the Ammonites. And one morning David got up and saw Bathsheba, the wife of a man called Uriah, bathing on her roof down below. And he sent his servants to go and get her. He didn't resist the temptation of her beauty, and unfortunately had relations with her, and a child was born. Now, David made the sin even worse by telling his soldiers to put Uriah, Bathsheba's husband, in the front line of the fighting so that he would get killed. And indeed he did die in the fighting. And then David married Bathsheba. Now, in 2 Samuel 12, we then hear that he had a visit from Nathan, one of the prophets. And Nathan went to him and told him a story. The story was about a rich man with lots of sheep and lots of cattle. But there was a poor man living nearby who just had one sheep. Now a traveller came, and the rich man, instead of using one of his own sheep, he killed the only sheep of this poor man. Nathan then went quiet, and he said to David, well, what should be done? Well, David was furious, and he said, well, that rich man should be put to death, and the poor man should be paid back 4 times over. Of course, then came the bombshell. And Nathan said, well, actually, you are that rich man. Look what you've done. You've had Uriah killed so that you could take his wife, Bathsheba. Now, David was pretty distraught. I bet he was struggling with that sin already for quite a long time. And now the guilt had found him out. And David broke down and started to plead for forgiveness. And he confessed, I've sinned against the Lord. And Nathan said, the Lord has taken your sin away, but there will still be consequences. Now, maybe if David had been stronger, he could have resisted the temptation. Or maybe he should have been off fighting with his army, and then it wouldn't have happened at all. But the result was a whole series of disasters. The first thing, 7 days later, the son that he had with Bathsheba died. And later still, another son, Amnon, was killed by his brother Absalom. And then Absalom rebelled against David and he was killed. And then a fourth disaster, another son, Adonijah, tried to take the throne and be the next king instead of Solomon. And he was put to death too. So 4 dead sons. Maybe not a coincidence after David saying the rich man should pay back 4 times. Although God forgives sin, it doesn't wipe out the consequences. Fortunately, though, God still didn't abandon David. He gave him hope and helped him through what those consequences would be. So, what can we learn from it? Well, as John MacArthur wrote, sin never brings profit, it always brings loss. For both Christians and non-Christians, sin always has practical consequences. Galatians 9, for example, says, "Do not be deceived. God is not mocked. For whatever a man sows, that he will also reap. For he who sows to his flesh will of the flesh reap corruption, but he who sows to the Spirit will reap everlasting life." Of course, we can learn from science too. For every action, there's a reaction. For example, if you drive regularly over the speed limit, you're likely to get a speeding ticket. Or if you drive when you've drunk more alcohol, which takes you over the limit, you can lose your license and end up in prison even. And drug abuse can lead to psychosis. And what about heavy drinking? Well, someone once said that I was an alcoholic in my earlier life, and God saved my soul, but he didn't give me a new liver. Interesting thought, that. And of course, sensible people who are law-abiding and moral cause less trouble for themselves in this life, and they also have a more positive impact upon those around them. Sin can also change the way we feel. It can cause guilt, depression, worry, and also negative views in life. And for Christians, there are additional important things that we lose. For example, sin causes us to feel separated from God. And because we're in a bad place, we lose opportunities for serving him. We're also more likely to make the same bad choice the next time. Sin is easier the second time. We also have a loss of wonderful inner qualities too, the fruits of the Spirit. Galatians 5 says, "The fruits of the Spirit are joy, love, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control." Sin can cause us to lose these things. And of course, there are eternal issues to think about too. Matthew 12 says, "On the day of judgment, people will give account for every foolish word they have spoken. For by your words you'll be acquitted, and by your words you'll be condemned." And again, Revelation 20, this one scares me a little bit. It says, "I saw the dead, small and great, standing before God, and books were opened. And another book was opened, which is the book of life. And the dead were judged according by their works, by the things that were written in the books." And of course, Jesus calls us to die to our old ways. Again in Galatians 2:20 says, "I've been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. And the life which I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me." So to conclude, we've got two choices really: a life pleasing God or a life pleasing ourselves. The Lord's Prayer says, "Lead us not into temptation." But we're all human. So when that temptation comes along, we need to ask God to help us to resist it and make the right choices. But if we do fail, God promises to forgive us our sins. That's why Jesus died. But there will be consequences. It does sadden God when we go against him and when we sin, but he does help us to deal with those consequences and work our way through them. And as a result, hopefully, we can become better and better people. So it's a bit of a tough message today, but we have a word of encouragement. James chapter 4, verse 7. "Submit yourselves to God, resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Come near to God, and he will come near to you. Wash your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. Humble yourselves before God, and he will lift you up." So thanks for listening, everyone, and have a great day. Bye now.